Clara's story did not begin with pain, but with love. Long before betrayal, there was hope. Long before silence, there was laughter. She had once walked hand in hand with Michael, her husband, dreaming of a future they would build together. He was the kind of man who believed in roots, in laying strong foundations. Together, they had talked about family, stability, and a home that would stand through storms. But fate is often cruel. Michael's accident left Clara, not just a widow, but a single mother, clutching her infant daughter Tiffany with trembling hands. The world told her she would crumble, but Clara refused. Every extra lecture she gave at the university, every book she stayed up late to grade, every dollar she saved, was not for herself. It was for Tiffany. Her daughter was her compass, her reason to rise each morning when grief tried to drag her down. The house they lived in was more than just wood and brick. It was Michael's legacy, built with his life insurance, with his sacrifice. Every corner whispered his presence. The porch where he once dreamed aloud, the kitchen where Tiffany took her first steps, the study where Clara wrote lesson plans while Tiffany slept in a crib nearby. To outsiders, it was an ordinary home. But to Clara, it was sacred ground, a living testament that love and sacrifice could survive death. So when Tiffany grew older, Clara's heart swelled with pride. Her daughter graduated, fell in love, and married Damon. To Clara, it felt like her years of sacrifice had finally bloomed. She thought she had done her job. She had raised her daughter into a woman ready to stand on her own, supported by a new family bond. She believed the foundation was strong. She believed the home she had built was respected. She believed her sacrifices had meaning. But sometimes, the cracks in a foundation remain hidden until the walls start to shake. It was an ordinary afternoon when Clara's phone buzzed on the table. She wiped her hands on a kitchen towel, expecting maybe a message from a student or an old colleague. Instead, her daughter's name flashed across the screen. Her heart lifted. Tiffany didn't call often anymore. She was busy, newly married, always wrapped in Damon's world. Still, Clara's mother's heart leapt at the thought, maybe she wants to spend time with me. Maybe she needs me. With a smile, Clara opened the message. It began innocently enough. "Mom, we're going on a family cruise." Clara's chest warmed. A family trip. The sea, the laughter, the togetherness she had longed for. She imagined herself watching Tiffany glow in the sunset, her son-in-law smiling, maybe even calling her Mom. For a brief, fleeting second, Clara felt included. But then, the next line shattered her hope. "It might be better if you stayed behind. Damon thinks your presence might bring the wrong energy. You understand, right?" Clara read the words again and again, hoping they might change, as if the screen itself was cruelly lying. But the message was real. The wrong energy. Her throat tightened, and the phone trembled in her hand. Wrong energy had her years of sacrifice, the sleepless nights, the endless giving, been reduced to a burden. Tears welled, not just from the insult, but from the messenger. It wasn't Damon's name on the screen. It was Tiffany's, her daughter. The girl she had cradled through nightmares, who once whispered, "I'll never leave you, Mommy." And now, she was the one delivering the blow. The invitation wasn't a door opening. It was a door slamming shut. Clara sat in the stillness of her kitchen, the hum of the refrigerator filling the silence where her daughter's love used to be. The house felt colder. The walls felt tighter. She realized then, sometimes cruelty doesn't come from enemies. It comes wrapped in the silence of those we love most. It wasn't Damon's words that haunted Clara. It wasn't even his cruelty, his smug suggestion that she was nothing more than a shadow at their celebration. No, what cut deepest was Tiffany's silence. Her daughter didn't defend her, didn't push back, didn't even whisper, "I'm sorry, Mom." Instead, Tiffany's silence echoed louder than any insult Damon could ever throw. That night, Clara wandered through her house like a ghost. The home she had built with sacrifice suddenly felt foreign, as though the walls themselves were pressing in on her. Every photo frame on the mantel became a mirror of betrayal. Tiffany's graduation picture, where Clara had shouted louder than anyone in the crowd. Tiffany's wedding portrait, where Clara's eyes glistened with pride. Now, those same images mocked her. The silence between mother and daughter had become a chasm. It wasn't filled with words. It was filled with absence, indifference, neglect. Clara sat at the edge of her bed, clutching the quilt she had sewn years ago for Tiffany's dorm room. Her fingers traced the stitches, each one a reminder of love poured into fabric. And yet, the daughter who once wrapped herself in it on cold nights now wrapped herself in Damon's approval instead. The cruelest part of betrayal is not always what is said, it's the silence. The silence that screams, "You don't matter. You are invisible. You are already gone." Clara thought back to Tiffany as a little girl, hiding behind her legs at the park, whispering, "Don't leave me, Mommy." That little girl had grown into a woman who now left her willingly, wordlessly, without even the dignity of goodbye. In the stillness of that night, Clara realized something she had never allowed herself to feel before. She was not just lonely, she was unwanted. And that truth burned louder than any shouted insult ever could. Clara had endured many small humiliations at Damon's hands, but some wounds never fade. He was clever in his cruelty. His insults slipped into conversations like poison hidden in honey, always delivered with a smirk, always disguised as a joke. One evening, when Tiffany had invited Clara for dinner, Damon raised a glass of wine and chuckled. "You know, Clara, you're like a permanent house guest we can't evict." The room froze for a moment. Clara's hand tightened around her fork. She waited for Tiffany to defend her, to scold him, to remind him that this woman wasn't baggage, but her mother, her blood, her only family left. But Tiffany only laughed nervously, her eyes darting away. She didn't protest. She didn't stand up. She didn't shield her mother from the sting. That silence cut deeper than the words themselves. Clara forced a smile that night, excused herself early, and walked home with trembling hands. But when she stepped inside her own house, she collapsed against the door. Damon's words replayed in her mind like a cruel refrain. "Permanent house guest, can't evict." Her eyes wandered over the living room. The sturdy beams, the carefully polished wood floors, the framed memories lining the walls. Every corner of this house had been paid for, not with Damon's sweat, not with Tiffany's, but with Michael's sacrifice. His life insurance had poured the foundation. Clara's endless work had built the walls higher, brick by brick. This wasn't a place she was borrowing, it was a legacy she had protected, a sanctuary she had bled for. And yet, Damon had reduced her to baggage. For hours, she sat in Michael's old study, running her fingers along the spine of his books. "If you were here," she whispered into the silence, "you would never let them speak to me this way." But Michael wasn't there. She was alone. Alone with memories, alone with echoes, and alone with the cruel reality that her daughter's laughter had joined Damon's mockery. For the first time, Clara asked herself, what am I in their eyes? A mother? A relic? Or just a burden they wish they could erase? And in that moment, the foundation of her world trembled. It came on a quiet morning. The kind of morning when the sun stretched lazily through the curtains, when the world felt calm for just a moment. Clara sat at the kitchen table with a cup of tea, the steam fogging her glasses as she reread one of Michael's favorite poems. Then her phone buzzed. A message. Her heart fluttered. Still, even after all the pain, there was that reflexive hope. Maybe Tiffany was reaching out. Maybe she had thought about her mother and wanted to bridge the silence. Clara's fingers trembled slightly as she unlocked the screen. It was from Damon. She read it once, twice, her vision blurred. "We'll send you pictures from the cruise. Someone needs to babysit the house, right? Babysit, not watch over, not protect, babysit," like she was a hired caretaker for a possession that didn't even belong to them. The words stung, not just for what they said, but for what they meant. In Damon's mind, Clara wasn't family. She wasn't a mother, a matriarch, a woman who had sacrificed her youth and dreams. She was just a placeholder, a forgotten relic to keep the lights on until they returned from their perfect holiday. Her tea grew cold. Her hands grew numb. The walls around her seemed to close in as the weight of Damon's contempt sank into her chest. And worse than Damon's arrogance, worse than his cruelty, was the unshakable knowledge that Tiffany had allowed it. Her daughter, her own flesh and blood, had stood silently by while the man she married reduced her mother to a babysitter of her own legacy. Clara pushed her chair back slowly, her breath shallow. She wandered into the living room, staring at the framed photos. Birthdays, graduations, the wedding, memories she had cherished, now tainted by betrayal. Her chest ached with something heavier than grief. It was rage. Quiet, simmering rage. For years, Clara had accepted Damon's jabs and Tiffany's silences. But this text, this casual, careless insult, was the moment the dam cracked. For the first time, Clara didn't feel powerless. She felt something stir deep within her, something she hadn't allowed herself to feel in years. Resolve. And though she didn't yet know how, she understood one truth with terrifying clarity. If they saw her as nothing but a babysitter, then perhaps it was time to remind them exactly who built the home they took for granted. Clara sat in Michael's old study that night, the text from Damon still glowing on her phone. Her chest felt heavy, but her eyes were strangely dry. She had cried enough. Something inside her had shifted, like a tremor beneath the earth before an eruption. On the shelves around her, Michael's books stood like quiet sentinels, the guardians of a past life. His framed photograph looked down at her, his eyes frozen in a smile that once promised safety, stability, a future they would build together. She whispered to him, "I thought our foundation was strong, Michael, but they treat me like I'm nothing. Like I'm a guest in the home you built with your life." Her fingers traced the edge of the drawer until she pulled it open. Inside, wrapped in an old envelope, lay the deed. The name on it was hers, Clara Evans, not Tiffany, not Damon. She stared at those letters as if seeing them for the first time. They weren't just ink on paper. They were proof. Proof that she wasn't baggage. Proof that she wasn't squatting in someone else's space. Proof that everything Damon took for granted, every brick, every wall, every memory, was hers. And in that moment, Clara realized something vital. She had been teaching her students for decades that literature and life mirror each other. That sometimes, demolition isn't destruction, it's preparation for rebirth. Old, cracked foundations must be torn down to make room for something stronger. Her grief began to harden into resolve. Damon and Tiffany had mocked the very foundation of her life, forgetting that she was the one who built it. If they believed she was just a babysitter, then she would remind them who held the keys. Clara placed the deed gently on the desk, smoothing its surface with deliberate care. Then she picked up the phone, not to call Tiffany, not to beg for love that had long since evaporated, but to dial a realtor. Her voice, steady and calm, surprised even herself. "Hello, I'm interested in putting my house on the market." The words felt electric, like striking a match in the dark. The demolition had begun. But this time, Clara wasn't the one being torn down. This time, she was the force holding the hammer. While Tiffany and Damon were boarding their luxury cruise, all smiles beneath the tropical sun, Clara was walking through the same house they had mocked her in. But she walked with new eyes. No longer did she see it as a prison of betrayal. Now, she saw it as power. The realtor's voice echoed softly beside her as they toured the rooms. "It's a beautiful property. Strong foundation, lovely details, plenty of character. Homes like this don't stay on the market long." Clara's lips curled into the faintest smile. Strong foundation. The words felt like a secret, a private vindication. This was her foundation, hers and Michael's, not Damon's, not Tiffany's. Potential buyers walked through the hallways with curious eyes. Couples whispered to each other about where they would place a couch, a crib, a dining table. One family paused in the living room, imagining birthdays and holidays. They saw a possibility where Clara only saw scars, and strangely, that gave her peace. Papers were drawn up, offers came swiftly, signatures were exchanged. The transaction unfolded not with fireworks or shouting, but with the quiet scratching of pens across paper. And Clara said nothing to Tiffany. No warning, no explanation, no goodbye. The cruise ship docked under a golden sky, and Damon swaggered down the pier with sunglasses on his face and self-satisfaction in his stride. Tiffany followed, her skin sun-kissed, her hair catching the breeze. They looked like a couple who had left the world behind for paradise. Carefree, untouchable, invincible. As the taxi pulled up to their neighborhood, Tiffany leaned against Damon and sighed. Home. Finally. But Clara knew something they did not. Home is not where you return. Home is what you respect. And they had disrespected theirs. Damon carried their luggage up the familiar path, Tiffany fumbling with her purse. He grinned, fishing out the house key. "Back to our castle," he joked. He slid the key into the lock. But it wouldn't turn. He frowned, tried again. The key scraped uselessly. What the hell, he muttered. Tiffany laughed nervously. Maybe it's jammed. Try again. He twisted harder, but the lock stayed firm, unyielding. Their laughter faded. Confusion darkened into unease. Then, before Damon could pound on the door, it opened. A stranger stood in the doorway. A woman with tired eyes and kind hands, her children peeking out from behind her legs. The living room behind her was rearranged. The furniture unfamiliar, the walls already carrying a different family's presence. Yes, the woman asked politely. Tiffany's lips parted in shock. What are you doing in our house? The woman blinked. Your house. I think you're mistaken. We closed on this property last week. The realtor gave us the keys. This is our home now. Damon's face drained of color. Tiffany stumbled back as if the ground had tilted beneath her. Their bags lay forgotten on the porch. Through the open doorway, they could see the truth. Every photo of their life was gone. Every trace of ownership erased. Their forever home wasn't theirs at all. Damon stammered, his arrogance crumbling. This isn't possible. There must be some mistake. But the woman simply shook her head, pity in her eyes. I'm sorry. But there's no mistake. You'll need to leave. The door closed softly, leaving them outside. Not homeowners, not victors, but strangers on a porch that no longer belonged to them. The air around them felt heavier, the silence unbearable. Tiffany's hands shook as she whispered, Mom, what did she do? For the first time, Damon had no clever remark, no smirk, no control. The cruel homecoming had stripped them of everything they thought was theirs, and Clara's silence echoed louder than any confrontation ever could. The days that followed were strangely quiet for Clara. For the first time in years, her phone didn't buzz with Tiffany's requests or Damon's smug demands. There were no tense dinners, no forced smiles, no cruel remarks disguised as jokes. Instead, there was stillness. She rented a small cottage by the sea, a modest place where the mornings began with the crash of waves and the cries of gulls. The air smelled of salt and freedom. Her books sat neatly stacked on a wooden shelf, her teapot whistled softly in the evenings, and Michael's photograph rested on the nightstand, his smile unchanged. This was not exile, this was reclamation. Sometimes she sat on the porch and thought of Tiffany, her daughter's laughter as a child, the way she once clung to Clara's hand on the first day of school. Memories like fragile glass, beautiful and dangerous. She loved her still. But she no longer carried the burden of being unloved in return. Her silence was no longer heavy. It was her shield, her choice. For Tiffany and Damon, silence now carried another meaning. It was the echo of absence, the sound of doors closed forever. They had their marriage, their wealth, their carefully constructed image, but not the foundation they thought they owned. Not the mother they assumed would always be waiting. In time, Tiffany might understand. In time, Damon might taste humility. But Clara no longer lived in the shadow of their choices. Her legacy wasn't the house, the possessions, or the inheritance they expected. Her legacy was the strength to walk away, the courage to turn silence into power. One evening, as the sun melted into the horizon, Clara whispered to the sea, "This is my gift, Michael, not disappearing, but finally being seen. By myself." And for the first time in decades, she felt whole. The legacy of silence wasn't emptiness, it was freedom, it was peace, and it was hers.